When are we going to get serious, Candy?
Okay. All right. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. I am giving this presentation. This is going to be an introduction to modern monetary theory, or MMT. I am giving this presentation for the first time in public, officially on Tuesday for Our Revolution, South Jersey, and I plan on giving it monthly at least, and also giving it throughout the state as much as I can. I have been working on this presentation for 3 months with the assistance of many people. This is my second to final dress rehearsal before my first presentation on Tuesday. So let's get started. This is going to be about, I wish it was 55 minutes long, but it is about an hour and 10 minutes long. Here we go. Good evening. My name is Jeff Epstein, and this is an introduction to modern monetary theory, or MMT.
When are we going to get serious, Candy, about the debt?
We got to deal with this big long-term debt problem, or it will deal with us.
But it's very simple. The government works like your house works. Our government has promised far more money than it actually has or probably ever will have.
We have to reduce our deficit, and we have to get back on a path that will allow us to pay down our debt.
We understand America is broke.
There is an urgent need for us to contain the growth of the deficit.
Taking money from our children and borrowing from China.
Our rising debt levels poses a national security threat.
We're broke. America's broke. Is to take out a credit card from the Bank of China in the name of our children, driving up our national debt.
When we raise and borrow all this money, 42 cents out of every dollar coming out of Washington, it's borrowed. 47% is coming from other countries like China.
Okay, so first, thank you to Jeff Ginter for putting that video together for me. Everything you just heard in that video, you have probably heard for your entire lives. Should be very familiar to you. By the end of this presentation, you will begin to understand why everything said in that video is completely wrong. Mainstream economics says that big things are not possible, not without causing economic Armageddon. Modern monetary theory demonstrates that big things are possible. They are possible now, and they have always been possible, and without causing economic problems. Therefore, many important things that most of us know about money is completely wrong. And not just wrong, but wrong in a way that ensures that the wealthy few remain the wealthy few. I would like to thank the following people for helping me improve this presentation: Virginia Kotz, James Fiel Martinez, Aaron Taylor, Ben Siley, and Esha Krishnaswamy, among others. I especially want to thank MMT economist Stephen Hale for his assistance in ensuring that this presentation is as accurate as it can be. So thank you for being here and for listening with an open mind. I do know what I'm talking about. But after we are done, I am encouraging you to be skeptical, do your homework, and decide the truth for yourself. Most of your questions will be answered by this presentation. After we are done, we will answer all of the rest of them. I am asking you to postpone your questions until the end. And I should also say, thank you to Our Revolution South Jersey for hosting this event. MMT is easy, it is simple, and it's elegant. The only thing that's hard is letting go of your lifetime of miseducation. MMT is a school of economic thought based on the ideas of Warren Mosler and is now backed by 25 years of research and scholarship developed by these people and more. Most of these people can be found on Twitter and are friendly and willing to answer your questions. And all of them will confirm everything you hear me say today. I am not an expert. I discovered MMT in February of last year when Jeff Ginter introduced it to me. What I can do, what I am good at, is I can introduce the basic concepts of modern monetary theory and express what I have learned from the economists. Once your eyes are open to MMT, however, it is time for you to move on to the experts to learn more. So first, the basics. What is money? What gives it value? Where does it come from? Money is a tool that the government uses to provision itself. The government needs things to be done, and it makes the people do them. And since we define the government, we are the government, and therefore we need these things to be done. We need to be defended. We need rule of law. We need infrastructure. We need to take cool inventions and to scale them up for bigger purposes. We need to gather intelligence. We need to take care of our people with healthcare and so on. We need all of these things and more. So the government needs things to be done, and it asks the people, it tells the people to do them, and it does them with the resources that we have available to us. When they do those things, money is the incentive given to the people for doing them, just like when you do your job at your company, they pay you with their money. Money has value because it is backed by the full faith and credit of the government. And that's true. But more specifically, money has value because if we do not pay our federal taxes with the money that the government gave us, then we have faith that there will be severe consequences. This means you must get a job in order to get their money, in order to pay your federal taxes with their money, in order to avoid those penalties. In other words, federal taxes drive money. They force the people to use the government's money, and they also establish and legitimize the currency. Notice the order of operations. You cannot pay your taxes until you get the money from the government. Like a paycheck from your job, you do what your company tells you to do, and then they pay you with money. And after taxes, that money is yours to keep. No strings attached. You owe it to no one. It is debt-free, and that's important. Debt-free. So where does money come from? And first, in 1971, the United States and many other countries went off of the gold standard and became fiat currencies. Fiat means the money is not backed by anything physical. Specifically, the United States. Where does money come from in the United States? Many countries have something similar to this. The Constitution of the United States, Article 1, Section 8, defines the powers of Congress. Two of those powers are to coin money and to provide for the counterfeit, to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting. To coin money. To coin means to create, as in to coin a phrase. This means that Congress can create all kinds of money. Paper bills, metallic coins, whatever else. Who creates the United States dollar? And the answer to that question is the central bank. In the United States, the central bank is called the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve does not create money just because they want to. They create money when they are commanded to do so by the Treasury. The Treasury is commanded to do so by a law that the president signed and after the federal budget is passed. The law that the president signed was originally a bill written by Congress. And in our corrupt system, Congress is under the influence of big money lobbyists and donors. So who creates the United States dollar is the central bank. But who authorizes the United States dollar is Congress. So Congress has the power to create money and to punish anyone else who tries to create money. This means that Congress is the only one in the world who is allowed to authorize or appropriate the United States dollar. In the United States, Congress is the source of money. If the resources are available, Congress can create as much money as they want to purchase those resources in order to do what needs to be done. Here is a bill currently under consideration. This screenshot is from last year. This is a bill introduced by Elizabeth Warren and others regarding the opioid epidemic. This section is the authorization of appropriations. $2.7 billion for fiscal year 2019 and the same amount for years following. This is the amount authorized to be created when this bill is passed into law and after the federal budget is passed. This is the amount created because someone sat down at a computer and typed that number into this document. This is the amount that the authors of the bill decided is necessary to purchase the resources that are necessary to implement this bill. Money is always created for a purpose, not just because they want pocket change. Everyone except the currency issuer, which in the United States is Congress, and we'll say more broadly, the federal government. Everyone else is a user of the United States dollar. Me and you and our companies and our cities and towns and our states and even other countries. When it comes to the United States dollar, China and Russia are currency users. All currency users are in the same position. The only difference is the amount that we have. Finally, all money in the economy comes from the currency issuer. So even if you work at a store that does no business with the government, perhaps you work at the grocery store, another company does do business with the government, and they have a contract with the government. When they do what they're supposed to do, they get money from the government. They use that money to pay their employees. Their employees go shopping, and one of their employees gives a big tip to a waitress at a restaurant, and then that waitress goes shopping at your grocery store, and then that money is used for your paycheck. All money in the economy comes from the currency issuer. So that's where money comes from. And now let's talk about how money is created and how it moves through the economy. You have a calculator. You have 900 on that calculator. You want to add 100 to it so it becomes 1,000. Where does that 100 come from? Do you need to find it? Do you need to borrow it from another calculator? Do you need to pay for it? When you press 100, it is. It is as if you are the god of numbers on that calculator. And this is pretty much how the currency issuer creates its own money. The currency issuer is the god of their money. Money exists when they will it to be. And for the issuer only, the word spend is exactly equal to the word create. They spend money into existence. They spend money into the economy. They emit it into the economy. And think about it. If you have no money, you are completely broke. You have no money, but someone grants you the power to create money whenever you need it. If you can't keep it, you can only spend it. You can only give it to somebody else. If you had this power, does it really matter that you have no money? And this is something that kids get immediately. No matter how many I tell, they immediately understand this. So reserve accounting occurs at a country's central bank. How is the central bank relevant to me and you? So I have a bank account at my local branch of Wells Fargo on Fork Landing Road in my town, along with a lot of other people and businesses. There are branches of Wells Fargo all around the country, and all of these branches and all of their bank accounts and all of their customers are managed by Wells Fargo corporate. Wells Fargo itself has a bank account at the central bank, and that they have $600 billion in their bank account, and that is a significant percentage of all of the bank accounts at all of the branches for all of their customers. Every bank in the country has a bank account at the central bank, and more accurately, it's a spreadsheet, 2 columns, the name of the bank and how much they have. So I have $1,000 in my bank account at my local bank. My bank has $600 billion in the central bank. Has $600 billion in their reserve account, in the reserves at the central bank. So the central bank is the bank of the banks. And it is also the top bank. There is no Earth Bank. There is no Universe Bank. So we're going to do 3 examples of reserve accounting. One where money is created, one where money is destroyed, and then one where money is transferred. Example number 1, creating money. Grandmom is due $300 in Social Security benefits. How does the government give Grandmom her benefits? The Social Security Administration determines that Grandmom is due $300. They communicate that to the central bank. The central bank communicates that to Grandmom's bank, and this is what happens. Grandmom's bank, their reserves are increased by $300. And then Grandmom's bank account is increased by $300. And that's it. This is called marking up an account. Money is created because numbers were made bigger. And this is all done with your finger on a computer keyboard at a computer, and in today's technology, all on the internet. Example number 2, destroying money. Let's start over again, and now Grandmom owes the government $100 in federal taxes. And this is exactly the opposite of the first example. Grandmom sends in her tax return and her $100 check to the IRS. The IRS communicates that to the central bank. The central bank communicates that with Grandmom's bank, and then this is what happens. Grandmom's bank, their reserves are reduced by $100. And then Grandmom's bank account is reduced by $100. And that's it. This is called marking down an account. When numbers are made smaller, money dies or is destroyed or disappears. When numbers are made bigger, money is created or born. All done with your finger on a computer keyboard. Ben Bernanke was the chairman of the Federal Reserve in the Great Recession of 2008.
Commitments of $1 trillion, doubling the size of the Fed's balance sheet.
Is that tax money that the Fed is spending?
It's not tax money. The banks have accounts with the Fed much the same way that you have an account in a commercial bank. So to lend to a bank, we simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account that they have with the Fed. So it's much more akin, although not exactly the same, but it's much more akin to printing money than it is to borrowing.
To lend to a bank, we simply use a computer to mark up the size of the account that they have at the Fed. And when he says not exactly the same, he just means on a computer and not physical money. What does it mean when money dies? A child draws a bill onto a piece of construction paper. He has just created money. What happens when he erases it? What happens to that money? Where does that money go? At the end of a game, the score is lowered back down to 0 on the scoreboard. What happened to those points? You have 1,000 on the calculator. You minus 100 from it, and now you have 900 again. Where did that 100 go? What happened to it? And the answer is it didn't go anywhere because it never existed in the first place. Money to me and you, to currency users, is real. Money to currency issuers is not real. It's a human-created concept. Last example, reserve accounting, transferring money. This is how money moves from one bank's reserves to another. And in this example, I receive a paper paycheck from my company, and we have two different banks. And this is nothing more than the first two examples put together. I receive a paper paycheck from my company. I hand that to my bank. My bank says that you will receive this money in about 24 hours. They communicate that check to the central bank, and then the central bank, and then the following happens. On my company side, my company's bank account is reduced by $100. Their bank's reserves are reduced by $100. And on my side, my bank's reserves are increased by $100. And then my bank account is increased by $100. This is reserve accounting. This is how money moves from one bank's reserves to another's using through the central banking system. In the United States, $5 trillion moves through the central banking system every day. That's about $2 quadrillion a year. And government-created money is really no more special than monopoly money. The only difference is that US dollar has an army behind it. Next chapter, created currency. So in the 1990s, economist Stephanie Kelton discovered Warren Mosler's ideas, and she initially thought that they were wrong, and she tried to prove him wrong. But in the course of trying to do that, she ended up proving him right. 1998 paper, Can Taxes and Bonds Finance Government Spending? This is most of the abstract. We're going to focus on just a single sentence right now. Modern governments actually finance all of their spending through the direct creation of high-powered money. Modern governments actually finance all of their spending through the direct creation of high-powered money. Every dollar of federal spending which is another way of saying that is, every dollar of federal spending is and has always been financed with created currency. Every federal benefit, every time it's paid, every federal program and agency, every federal salary, every paycheck ever received by a federal employee. The military is a federal program. The salary of every military personnel and every piece of equipment is and has always been financed with created currency. And yet we often hear, I don't want my taxes paying for war. I want them paying for health care and education. But now we know that the military is a federal program. So how does that make sense? And the same thing when someone says, I don't want my taxes to pay for your big program. When it comes to federal programs, how does that make sense? Same with Social Security benefits. Every Social Security benefit ever paid has been financed with created currency. So how can it ever go broke, or be stolen from, or be borrowed from. And the same is true with all federal benefits. Federal taxes do not fund federal spending. Federal spending funds federal taxes. And it's not just a cute statement. It's precisely true. And remember the order of operations. You can't pay your taxes until you get money from the government. Another sentence, same abstract. It is argued that the proceeds from taxation and bond sales are technically incapable of financing government spending. And when she says technically incapable, she means impossible. Economist Pavlina Cherneva, taxes are not stockpiled in any material sense for future spending. Economist Randall Wray, indeed, if government spends and lends currency into existence, it clearly does not need tax revenue before it can spend. Stephanie Kelton, same paper. Taxes are not even capable of financing government spending since their collection implies their destruction. And it's destroyed in the same way as that 100 is destroyed in our subtraction problem. So all federal spending is financed with created currency, which logically extends that federal taxes do not pay for anything. And here's some evidence to emphasize this. During World War II, during the heart of the Great Depression, the American people had no money. And yet this is exactly when the United States paid for two of the biggest programs in its history, World War II and FDR's New Deal. If they needed our tax money, this would not have been possible. Federal taxes do not pay for anything because all federal spending is financed with created currency, which is proven by reserve accounting, the realities of reserve accounting. And that is the subject of Stephanie Kelton's paper. And notice the sentence that comes right before the two that we just analyzed. After carefully considering the complexities of reserve accounting, this is what we conclude. Since federal taxes don't pay for anything, then why do we pay federal taxes? Federal taxes drive money. The government needs to provision itself. Taxes make the people need the money, so they do what the government needs to be done. Federal taxes are one of many tools to control inflation. We could raise taxes on a product or on the people themselves to reduce demand. We could do the opposite. We could lower taxes on a product or on the people themselves to increase demand. Federal taxes can impose moral decisions. So if we don't want the people to do something, we could raise taxes on that thing to make it more expensive. We could do the opposite. If we want people to do something, we could lower taxes on that thing in order to make it less expensive. We could also tax the rich to discourage wealth inequality. We need to tax the rich because they're too damn rich. They profit off of our suffering. They purchase our politicians and our laws, and they are destroying our ability to live on the planet. Taxing the rich reduces their power, which immediately increases our power. We need to tax the rich because it is the moral and right thing to do, not because we need their money. Because when it comes to federal programs in our economy, our current economy, we can't get it. This chart represents the personal wealth of the United States Congress, the individual members of Congress, their personal wealth. 535 members total. 37% people with yellow, represented by yellow, have a personal wealth in the bottom 80%. 80% of America is 260 million people. They are represented by 7% of Congress. The Pony for All Act of 2018. In her book regarding the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton said to Bernie Sanders, "It's so nice you want to give everybody a pony, Bernie. Everybody would love a pony, but how are you going to pay for it?" So let's do a thought experiment. Let's write the Pony for All Act. Let's give every single citizen a free pony, because it can be done, as silly as it is. Maybe not literally for every single citizen, but it can certainly be done on a very large scale. So what would it take to do it? Our first step is to understand our current situation. You can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. So as an example, we'll talk about the United States. There are 320 million citizens. There are about 500,000 ponies. Demand far outstrips supply. We must make this roughly equal. The Pony for All Act is intended to give every citizen a pony. So we don't want to decrease demand in this case. Therefore, we must increase supply. How do we do that? How do we increase 500,000 ponies to be 320 million ponies? We have a number of options, but given our current state of science and technology and the scale we need to do this, the only practical solution is to reproduce. Mommy and daddy ponies are going to have to do their thing over and over and over again. Another question that we have to answer is, how long will it take? In order to answer that, we need to know the biological realities of ponies. How many are there currently? What is their gestation period? How long after giving birth does a mommy need to wait until she can do her thing again? What's the minimum age to give birth? And what's the mortality rate? Given our current situation, and given these biological realities, we have determined that it's going to take about 20 years. So let's begin. We've been taking care of 500,000 ponies forever. We've been taking care of 500,000 ponies, so that's not a problem. But now the population is exploding, and this has enormous consequences. It means that we will need more supplies. It means that we will need to educate millions of more people to make this program happen, to develop this program, and then to maintain this program. It means that we will have to distribute all of these things around the country to avoid overcrowding and to bring it all closer to the people. So the Pony for All Act will create an entire new industry with lots of new jobs. And this is an excellent side benefit, but there is something much more important. So now it is 20 years later, and now we have 320 million ponies, and it is time for the people to pick them up. So they go to Ponies R Us, and we have the best staff. It is totally organized. It's not chaos. That's not the problem. But the people don't know how to take care of ponies, so we need to train them. Their homes are not prepared to handle ponies, so we need to prepare them. So all of the supplies and services and labor that we just discussed are now needed by everyone. And finally, with hundreds of millions of ponies, it is a serious question. What happens when they die? So it takes 20 years. This is the full life cycle. This is what goes into our bill. And notice that at no point did we talk about money. But now we finally know the resources that will be necessary to make this happen. And now we can determine how much those resources will cost and then add them in to a section called the authorization of appropriations. Let's say that the powerful person finds 20 years to be unacceptable. They say, I will make my little girl wait 5 years, but there's no way I'm going to make her wait 20 years. That's crazy. So what choices do we have? What choices do we have to make it happen faster? We could make it the law. We could threaten severe consequences in that law. And we could also throw money at it, however much we needed, $10 trillion. So the question is what happens if we try and force it to go faster? And the answer is nothing. Forcing it to happen faster simply doesn't work. The reason being is that no amount of money can change biological processes. No amount of money can change how quickly people can be educated, or how fast we can distribute these things, or how long it takes to train citizens, or to prepare their homes. That's what's important. This is what's important. To the currency issuer, money doesn't matter. Only real resources matter. To currency users, money is real. To the currency issuer, money is not real. The only thing that's real to the currency issuer are resources, is reality. If the real resources are available, then creating the money to purchase them is not inflationary. If you have the resources to do it, do it. If you don't, don't. When I say real resources, I mean raw materials, labor, technology, and time. Because even if you have the stuff, you need time to make it happen. So nothing can make this happen. Nothing can make the Pony for All Act happen in less than 20 years. The realities of real resources are outside of human control. Money and rules are human-created concepts. It doesn't matter how many rules you have. It doesn't matter how good those rules are. There is no way to ensure that humans follow human-created rules. No matter how corrupt, however, no matter how corrupt an individual is or how corrupt an organization is, the limitations of real resources can never be violated. so we can actually give every citizen a free pony, as silly as it is. So why can we not give our citizens universal health care and college, and especially since it requires no resources to do so, directly speaking, why can't we cancel student debt? To emphasize everything, or to confirm everything that we just concluded in our thought experiment, is Alan Greenspan, who was the predecessor on the Federal Reserve to Ben Bernanke. Here he is talking in congressional testimony, meaning under oath, with former Speaker Paul Ryan, and the subject is Social Security.
So having personal retirement accounts is another way of making a future retiree benefits more secure for their retirement. And also, do you believe that personal retirement accounts as a component to a system of solvency does help improve solvency? Because when you have a personal retirement account policy, it's accompanied with a benefit offset. With that feature in place, do you believe that personal retirement accounts can help us achieve solvency for the system and make those future retiree benefits more secure?
Well, I wouldn't say that the pay-as-you-go benefits are insecure in the sense that there's nothing to prevent the federal government from creating as much money as it wants and paying it to somebody. The question is, how do you set up a system which assures that the real assets are created which those benefits are employed to purchase? So it's not a question of security. It's a question of the structure of a financial system which assures that the real resources are created for retirement as distinct from the cash. The cash itself is nice to have, but it's got to be in the context of the real resources being created at the time those benefits are paid, so that you can purchase real resources with the benefits, which of course are cash.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a question of economic security. It's a question that the real resources are created for retirement so that you can purchase the real resources with the benefits, which is money. And Paul Ryan regrets asking this because he was saying, my donors really, really want to privatize Social Security, and I am asking you if there is a good economic justification for doing so. And Alan Greenspan said that there was not. So he came to the same conclusion as we reached in our thought experiment. To the currency issuer, money doesn't matter because it's not real. Only real resources matter because it's real. Generally speaking, senior citizens don't need money. They need the things that they can purchase with that money. They need the resources. Next chapter, the federal deficit. The federal deficit is the amount spent into the economy in a single year minus what they tax back. For example, they spend $3 trillion into the economy in 1 year, and then they tax back $1.7 trillion. And this means that they have left $1.3 trillion in the economy. $1.3 trillion is left in the people's pockets. A ballooning deficit. Too much spending is not the problem. What matters is what our governments do. and what they don't do. What matters is who they do it for and who they don't do it for. What matters is how moral, equitable, efficient, and inflationary their spending is. And what matters is that they funnel their spending to the wealthy few because they're legally bribed to do it. Too much spending is not the problem. The problem is income inequality and poisoned water and poverty and suicide and so on. That is reality. What the government does is more important than what's left over. The federal deficit is like our federal paycheck. It is, and it should be called, our national income. So when our politicians or our so-called experts or our media say it is urgent that we reduce the deficit, what they are saying is that it is urgent that we stop giving the people income or savings. Next chapter, the national debt. So currency users require income. If we don't get money from the government, we must get it from somewhere else before we can spend. An example of where we can get that money from is to get a loan from a bank. So we go to a bank, currency users go to a bank, and we ask for a loan, say $1,000. The bank analyzes our histories, and they analyze our net worth, our assets minus our debts. And then they decide, is this person likely to pay back this loan? And if they think that we are, they give us the money. When we get that money, we are instantly in debt for $1,000 plus interest to that bank. We are in debt to a private, for-profit corporation. And this kind of debt is scary because that bank will do whatever it takes to get their money back. This is called private debt, where the government is public and everyone else is private. Currency users getting a loan from a bank, there is no equivalent situation for the currency issuer. There is just nothing that makes sense for the currency issuer. There is no bank above Congress, above the currency issuer. In the United States, the Federal Reserve, the central bank, must do as Congress commands it to do. And think about how ridiculous this is, really. The God of money does not need to go to anyone else to ask for the money that only it can create. Alan Greenspan.
Are U.S. Treasury bonds still safe to invest in?
Very much so. I think this is not an issue of credit rating. The United States can pay any debt it has because we can always print money to do that. So there is zero probability of default.
The United States can pay any debt it has because we can always create money in a computer to do it. There is zero probability of default. And notice that he did not say low probability. He did not say remote probability. He said 0 probability. As long as the government exists, it is impossible for them to not be able to pay their bills. Currency issuers like the United States do not have a debt, period. Not in a way that means anything like a debt means to you and me, currency users. But practically speaking, this is what the national debt is. It is the accumulation of every federal paycheck, what we used to call the federal deficit. Every federal paycheck that has ever been given to us by the government in the United States ever since the first dollar was created in 1796. This is literally the money in our bank accounts, investments, and wallets. It is our debt-free savings. And savings by definition means debt-free. Like a paycheck from our job, we do what we're asked. We do what we're asked, we do what we're told, they give us money, and then we have that money and we can do as we wish with it. It is no strings attached. We do not owe it to anyone. The national debt is and should be called our national savings. Our national savings is our wealth. The problem is not too much wealth. The problem is wealth inequality. Who has too much of it? Who doesn't have enough of it? Practically speaking, the national debt is our national savings. It's what we own, not what we owe. Technically speaking, the national debt is, roughly speaking, an accounting reflection of our national savings. We can talk about that afterwards. However, the real national debt that really will bankrupt our grandchildren has nothing to do with money. So that is pretty much MMT. And now I want to talk about, after studying MMT for a year, what have I concluded with that knowledge? I've taken that knowledge, I've looked at our government and our society, and this is what I personally conclude. So much of what I'm about to say is me talking, and less of it is MMT itself. Those who don't understand MMT, or those who don't want you to understand MMT, will say things like the following. The fantasy is creating money causes inflation. You create $1 and it causes inflation. You create $2 and it causes hyperinflation. But the reality is, if the resources are available, creating money to purchase them is not inflationary. And hyperinflation is more complicated than we have time to go into right now. But very roughly, simply speaking, if you create money without limits, it may cause hyperinflation. So don't do that. If you create money when there are no resources to purchase, it will cause inflation. So don't create money when there are no resources to purchase. Two analogies. Eating is a good thing when you're hungry or you're starving. When you are no longer hungry, eating is a bad thing. When a tire is flat or is low, pumping air into it is a good thing. When it is filled or overfilled, pumping air into it is a bad thing. And in the case of a tire specifically, when it's overfilled, you can drain some air out of it. We understand the nature of a tire. We have simple tools to prevent, measure, and respond to problems. And the same is true with inflation. We understand the nature of inflation. We have many tools to prevent, measure, and respond to inflation. And in an economy such as the United States, hyperinflation is not just unlikely, it's absurd. But we're not talking about money, and we're not talking about flat tires. We're talking about people. If the people need help, help them. And I do not mean provide them with luxury. I mean stop their suffering. So we're going to watch the first video again, and I hope that now you will begin to understand why what is being said is such nonsense.
When are we going to get serious, Candy, about the debt?
We got to deal with this big long-term debt problem, or it will deal with us.
But it's very simple. The government works like your house works. Our government has promised far more money than it actually has or probably ever will have.
We have to reduce our deficit, and we have to get back on a path that will allow us to pay down our debt.
We understand America is broke.
There is an urgent need for us to contain the growth of the deficit.
Taking money from our children and borrowing from China.
Our rising debt levels poses a national security threat.
We're broke. America's broke. Is to take out a credit card from the Bank of China in the name of our children, driving up our national debt.
When we raise and borrow all this money, 42 cents out of every dollar coming out of Washington, it's borrowed. 47% is coming from other countries like China.
So are they lying? Or do they just not know better? And it doesn't matter, because I give benefit of the doubt to the powerless. I will not give benefit of the doubt to the powerful, who personally benefit off keeping the powerless ignorant about how the economy works. Our federal representatives tell us that they can't give us what we need, even though they really want to, because they tell us that not even preventing our suffering in reality is more important than their made-up fiscal responsibility. And not only do they pretend that they can't give us these things, they pretend also that they don't know how to give us these things. How are you going to pay for it is the question that the government, who does understand how the economy works, asks their people who don't understand how the economy works. Somehow, the people are responsible for figuring out how they're going to pay for it, figuring it out for the government before the government will give the people what they need to not die. Our governments have an abundance of resources, but they withhold it from the people because they're legally bribed to do it. The people are left to fight over the scraps, and this is the kind of behavior that it causes. Please take a moment to look. I deserve more than you. Not because society is unjust and we're all doing the best we can in a really terrible situation. No, I deserve more than you because you are less than me. You are less than me. And while this behavior is disgusting, what's really disgraceful is the system that allows it to happen. Our government allows their people to fight over scraps when they have more than enough to provide for all. They shame and punish their people for making bad decisions when they could easily prevent them from ever having to face those decisions in the first place. Our government manufactures scarcity. And therefore, we have to be terrible to each other and to our families and to ourselves just to survive. So our government won't provide these things for us, and the only ones left to do so are for-profit, private corporations. We are forced into private debt. Our lives are placed on the altar of their profit. So they sabotage our government with big money, and then they turn around and they say government is the problem. But they also shut us out of the government so we don't have a chance to make it better. But it doesn't matter because the government is the problem. And then they tell us that the only possible solution is a free market, which coincidentally enriches those who sabotage the government. Currency users do have to worry about money. We do have to worry about bills and debt collectors and bankruptcy. We do have to worry about what will happen if we can't afford to pay our bills. For us, fiscal responsibility is critical. For us, private debt can be ruinous. For currency issuers, they have a lot of things they need to worry about. But one of those things is not money. Fiscal responsibility for a currency issuer is completely nonsensical. Public debt is nothing. So if there is nothing else that you remember from today, I am asking you to remember this. A currency issuer is totally different than a currency user. Congressional appropriations. Here is the technically correct answer to how are you going to pay for it? Every federal program is paid for with congressional appropriations. We are a sovereign fiat currency. If we have the real resources to do it, then you can choose to create the money to purchase those resources to do it. But here is the answer that I believe should be given to this terrible question. We will pay for it by getting you out of office and replacing you with someone who will never ask that question again. They will do whatever it takes to just get the job done. And until that day, 100% of our energy will be dedicated to making your life a living hell. Great things are possible, and they always have been possible. But they will never happen until we stand up and demand it. But we will never demand it if we don't believe that it's possible. MMT demonstrates that it's possible. Learning MMT will not stop the corrupt from doing bad things. Learning MMT will stop the corrupt from stopping us from doing good things. Thank you. So this is what I'm going to leave on screen. I'm not going to say anything. Oh, yeah, this too. So we want to teach this to anyone and everyone, and if you could refer us to those who would benefit, please help us get in touch. This is the screen I'm going to leave up. I'm not going to say anything. This is what it's going to just be up there while we answer questions. So thank you for being here. If there are any questions, I'd love to answer them. Otherwise, please enjoy your night, the rest of your night. Give you a minute if you have anything. Otherwise, that's it. Okay. Enjoy the rest of your night, everyone. I will be doing this one more time tomorrow night at 7 o'clock on Facebook, Eastern Standard Time. And that's going to be my final rehearsal. And then my first official presentation will be on Tuesday in New Jersey. So come on out. All right. Enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you for being here.